Most people imagine spiritual awakening as a mystical explosion, an extraordinary event capable of transforming life immediately and visibly. They expect grand signs, celestial visions, or dramatic shifts that would sweep away their old reality in one single stroke. But what almost no one talks about, and what few have the courage to truly recognize, is that the real experience of awakening is very different. It is silent. It is subtle. It is an intimate revolution that happens deep within consciousness. Without noise, without fireworks, without external applause. Today, you won't hear another theory about spirituality. Today, you will be invited to look within and to recognize, with honesty and gentleness, how true awakening may already be happening inside you, so discreetly that you might have overlooked it. The genuine experience of awakening is not about becoming better or special. It's about seeing life with new eyes. It's about quietly realizing that something fundamental within you has shifted. And from that moment on, reality can never be the same again. This is not a video to teach you how to chase awakening as a distant trophy. It's an invitation to realize that true awakening is not an unreachable destination, but a state of being that reveals itself in the small cracks of ordinary perception. And perhaps by the end of this journey, you'll discover that you are far more awake than you ever imagined. The Great Illusion. Awakening as a dramatic event. There is a deeply rooted image in the collective unconscious about spiritual awakening, an image forged through centuries of stories, films, traditions, and human expectations. Many believe that awakening is about crossing an invisible portal amid brilliant lights, feeling an overwhelming ecstasy, hearing angelic voices, or receiving a sudden explosion of wisdom from the heavens. They wait for a grand cosmic ceremony, a moment so extraordinary it could never go unnoticed, something so magnificent it would clearly divide life into before and after. But the reality is that this Hollywood-like image causes more frustration than enlightenment. It fuels an endless search for peaks of experience, for external proofs of a phenomenon that is, in truth, internal. And when such dramatic signs do not appear, a bitter doubt creeps in. Is something wrong with me? Am I not worthy of awakening? True spiritual awakening, however, is the opposite of this imagined spectacle. It does not announce itself with thunder. It does not invade the mind with blinding flashes. It approaches like a breeze. You cannot see it, but you can feel it. It settles like the morning light, quietly dissolving darkness, without a single sound, without a single explosion. The soul awakens not because it witnessed miracles in the sky, but because silently within, the perception of reality has changed. The greatest mistake is to wait for awakening as an external event, as if it depended on special circumstances, specific rituals, or mystical blessings granted from outside in. What few realize is that true awakening is a movement of consciousness beyond automatic identification with thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. It is the emergence of a new way of seeing, feeling, and being. Of course, for some, intense experiences do occur. There are legitimate accounts of sudden consciousness expansion, profound transcendent experiences that shake the ego structure, but these cases are exceptions, not the rule. Most awakenings happen silently, in the midst of ordinary life, as the person goes through an apparently normal day. No fanfare, no mystical visions, no promises of sudden power or enlightenment. This understanding is liberating. It frees us from the endless waiting. It frees us from the trap of comparing our inner experiences to idealized stories. It brings us back to where true awakening has always been, here, now, in the simple act of observing ourselves and the world with new eyes. The great illusion of the dramatic event is fueled by the mind's need for certainty. The mind craves spectacle to validate what it feels as truth. But awakened consciousness does not need external phenomena to prove its existence. It simply is. And once you start recognizing it, you realize it has always been there, in the simplest things, in the sound of rain, in silent breathing, in a present gaze toward life. Thus, the invitation is not to wait for an external miracle signaling your transformation. The invitation is to quiet noisy expectations and begin noticing the subtle signs already emerging within your consciousness. Awakening is not announced by thunderclaps. It is announced by small detachments, sincere questions, and the ability to simply be here without needing to control. Perhaps the greatest miracle is precisely this: to realize that awakening does not arrive like a bolt splitting the heavens, but as a presence that has always been there, waiting for your deeper gaze. And it is within this silent recognition that the true journey begins. The invisible beginning, the discomfort. Few recognize. Spiritual awakening does not begin with a grand revelation. It begins with something far more subtle, and for many, unsettling: a silent sense of disconnection. It's as if, suddenly, what once made sense starts losing its brilliance. As if life, which once seemed satisfying within its old patterns and certainties, begins to reveal tiny invisible cracks. And the curious thing is that, to those observing from the outside, everything appears the same. The job, the family, the commitments, the old dreams, all seem to carry on as usual. But internally, something essential has shifted. This initial discomfort is, in fact, one of the most sacred stages of awakening, though it is often misunderstood. Many people, when feeling this disconnection, think something is wrong. They believe they are in crisis, that they've lost their way, and rush to seek new distractions to fill the growing void. They try to force themselves back into molds that now feel suffocating. But what they fail to realize is that this discomfort is not a mistake. It is a call. It is in that empty space, in that silent discomfort, that the new begins to emerge. The soul, in its deep wisdom, begins to disidentify from old roles, masks, and unquestioned beliefs. A strange clarity begins to arise. What once defined life, success, recognition, control, belonging, no longer satisfies what is truly alive within us. This is not a rational process. It cannot be easily explained. It is felt between the lines of existence, in unplanned pauses, in distant gazes, in moments when something within sighs for something still unnamed. This invisible beginning of awakening is profoundly solitary because it is a journey no one can walk for you. There are no guaranteed maps, no ready-made answers, and often people around you won't understand. They will continue offering the same old solutions for a void that can no longer be filled in the same way. They will try to comfort you with distractions, practical advice, logic, without realizing that what is moving within you transcends ordinary understanding. There's an old metaphor that says, the butterfly's first step is not flight, but the silent deconstruction inside the cocoon. There, before gaining wings, it dissolves completely. From the outside, it seems just like a biological process, but inside it is an act of absolute faith. The discomfort at the beginning of awakening is much like that. On the outside, you may look the same. Inside, your old form is dissolving to make way for something infinitely more true. And that is why so many abandon the path before they even realize they were walking it. Because without understanding that discomfort is part of the process, it can easily be mistaken for defeat, loss, or error. But in reality, this discomfort is the fertile soil where new perception begins to germinate. If you feel disconnected from what once excited you, if something inside you silently questions the meaning of old routines, if there is a nameless longing for something deeper, know this: it is not a failure. It is the most precious sign that life is moving within you in a new way, that a new consciousness is beginning to breathe through the old structure. Awakening does not shout, it whispers. And the first whisper is this inexplicable discomfort, recognized only by those attentive enough to hear the beginning of an inevitable transformation. Those who have the courage to stay with the emptiness, to listen to the silent call, will soon discover that beneath the discomfort, a new life is pulsing, waiting to be lived with wider eyes and a freer heart. The real shock, realizing your observation creates your experience. There is a silent yet profoundly transformative moment in every awakening journey. The instant you realize that the reality you experience is not simply something happening to you, it is something happening through you. It's not just the world shaping your perception, it's your perception that shapes the world you experience. This discovery doesn't come as a new idea to be debated intellectually. It comes as a vibrational impact, as an inner shift that forever changes the way you walk upon the earth. The real shock is not realizing that spiritual laws or metaphysical concepts exist. The real shock is viscerally recognizing that your attention, your vibration, your active consciousness are intertwined with the very fabric of reality. It is understanding that we are not passive spectators of a play unfolding before us. We are co-authors, painting the landscape called life with the invisible brushes of belief, expectation, and intention. Many spiritual traditions, and even modern discoveries in quantum physics, echo this profound truth. The observer influences the observed. But it's one thing to hear this phrase, it's something entirely different to feel it inside you as a certainty that needs no proof. When this realization happens, the entire structure of victimhood, of chance, of helplessness before life begins to crumble. And this is a powerful, though often unsettling transition. At first, intense discomfort can arise, because if we are co-creators of our experiences, it means we can no longer blame chance, others, or even fate. It means we are radically responsible for the vibration we emit, for the lenses through which we choose to see the world. This responsibility can feel heavy to those still attached to the old way of existing. But for those who have the courage to remain present before this revelation, something new and grand begins to be born. Freedom. Realizing that your observation creates your experience is like waking up from an ancient dream. You realize that all along, you are part of an energetic dance where your emotions, thoughts, and states of consciousness were the silent rhythm moving the music of life. And instead of feeling small before this, you begin to feel yourself as a living part of the whole, capable of altering your internal reality and consequently the external world. This understanding deeply transforms how we deal with challenges, relationships, and projects. It no longer makes sense to fight against what is outside. True alchemy happens within. Changing the vibration with which you observe a problem is often what dissolves the problem. Shifting your gaze toward abundance when facing scarcity is what begins to open new doors. Cultivating silent gratitude where once there was only complaint almost magically alters the vibrational field around you. And yet this transformation does not unfold in a straight line. Even after this realization, we sometimes slip back into old habits of judgment, fear, and control. But the awakening has already happened. Consciousness has already expanded. And little by little, life stops being about automatic reactions and starts becoming about conscious creation. The real shock is not discovering something new outside of you. It is finally seeing the vastness of what has always been within you. When you realize that the external world is largely a reflection of your internal state, the question shifts from, why is this happening to me? To, what within me is resonating with this experience? And this simple change of question has the power to alter your entire reality. The universe responds not to the words you speak, but to the frequency you vibrate. What you observe, not just with your eyes, but with your consciousness, expands. And by recognizing this principle, you begin to align yourself with a new way of living. More awake, more conscious, more free. This is the true turning point. The moment when you stop being just a lost traveler and become a conscious creator of your own journey. The vibrational grieving. When the old self begins to fade. When consciousness awakens to its true nature, it's not just the way you see the world that transforms. Your very identity begins to dissolve. And this process, while deeply liberating, also carries a silent grief, an almost invisible mourning. The old self, built from expectations, fears, limiting beliefs, and social identities, begins to crumble. And although this dismantling is necessary for expansion, it rarely happens without resistance, without a profound sense of loss. For years, perhaps decades, we carry narratives that shaped who we believed we were. Stories about our successes and failures, about who loved or rejected us, about what was right to pursue and what was forbidden to dream. These stories grew deep roots, nourished by the desire for belonging and security. When awakening begins to consolidate, it's as if a soft but relentless light starts exposing the cracks in these old foundations. Suddenly we see that what we so fiercely defended as me was just a temporary construction, an adaptation to a world that no longer represents us. This moment is delicate. There is a natural sadness in releasing old versions of ourselves, even if those versions were built from pain and illusion. It's like leaving behind a house where we lived for a long time. Even if the walls were crumbling, there are still memories, still attachments. And this vibrational grieving is not just mental, it is felt in the body, in the energy field, in emotions that arise without apparent reason. It is common in this stage to feel lost. The old motivations that once fueled your actions seem to lose meaning. Ambitions that once felt essential now seem hollow. Relationships based on old roles start to misalign, and a strange loneliness may settle in, not from a lack of people, but from a lack of vibrational recognition. We are no longer who we were, but we are not yet fully who we are becoming. This stage of awakening demands a different kind of courage, the courage to stay present amid the dissolution, without rushing to fill the void with new mass. It's tempting to quickly replace the old self with a new spiritual identity, to cling to new labels, new dogmas, new certainties. But true transformation happens when we allow ourselves to remain in the space between what we no longer are and what has not yet fully revealed itself. There is a deep beauty in this grieving, because as we release the old structures, we create space for the true essence to bloom. An essence that needs no story, no justification, an essence that simply is. Each layer that falls away brings us closer to the simplicity of being. Each letting go opens a doorway to a freedom that cannot be intellectually understood, only lived. And although this process may seem lonely, it is deeply supported by the greater intelligence of life. The universal energetic field sustains this silent rebirth, even if on the surface it feels like wandering through a dark night without a map. The discomfort is a testimony to the depth of transformation taking place. The sadness is a sign that something very old has finally been allowed to leave. When we look at this vibrational grieving with gentleness, we see that it is sacred. There is no mistake in mourning who we once were, even knowing we cannot go back. There is no weakness in shedding tears for the mask we once believed to be our true face. The old self does not need to be rejected or denied. It can be honored as a part of the journey, a bridge that brought us to the point where we are now ready to cross beyond it. Thus, the invitation is this: allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to honor the farewell to the old versions of yourself with gratitude and tenderness. Because every tear shed in this process is a vibrational release, preparing the soil for the blossoming of a freer, lighter, and truer consciousness. The blooming of consciousness, small moments of inner vastness. After the silent crossing of vibrational grief, something new begins to emerge, not in a grandiose way, not with spectacular announcements, but like small seeds sprouting into fertile soil after a long winter season. Awakened consciousness does not bloom in a single day. It reveals itself in moments of inner vastness, moments so subtle that, to the hurried mind, they might go unnoticed. But for the one who has learned to listen with the heart, these moments are the harbingers of a new way of living. Maybe it's while watching a sunset, when suddenly the mind quiets and a deep feeling of belonging arises without any apparent reason. Maybe it's in the middle of an ordinary conversation, when you catch a glimpse that words are just surfaces floating over a living ocean of silence. Or perhaps it's in a moment of solitude, when far from any distraction, a serene presence fills the empty space and whispers without words that everything is exactly as it should be. These moments are brief, but they are transformative. They carry the vibrational signature of something far greater than the ego can grasp. They are like windows that open for a second onto an infinite horizon, and even if they close again, they leave behind a vibrational memory, a silent remembrance that life is far vaster, deeper, and more mysterious than our ordinary senses can comprehend. The blooming of consciousness is not about abandoning the world, but about seeing it with new eyes. The same trees, the same streets, the same people. Everything begins to be seen with a different clarity. The division between me and the other, starts to dissolve in the invisible space between one gaze and another. The separation between the sacred and the mundane loses its meaning. Everything becomes, somehow, an expression of the same living field of consciousness. This blooming is subtle precisely because it is not something the mind can force. It happens when the mind relaxes its need to control, when the human being stops the desperate search for grand experiences and instead opens to the wonder of what already is. Inner vastness cannot be conquered. It is revealed when we dissolve the self-imposed barriers that once kept us from feeling it. At times, there may be the temptation to doubt these moments, to dismiss them as fleeting emotions. But for those who have experienced that silent presence, doubt no longer holds the same power. Because even without proof, even without rational explanation, something within recognizes what was felt, even briefly, was more real than anything ever merely thought. The blooming of consciousness also brings a new relationship with time. The past loses its rigidity. The future ceases to feel like an inevitable weight. Life begins to be lived more in the present, not as a theory or a forced practice, but as a natural consequence of being awake to what is. And in the present, each moment contains the fullness of being. There is a deep humility in this process, because before inner vastness, all the arrogance and certainties of the human mind become small. The true sage is not the one who knows everything, but the one who kneels inwardly before the mystery of existence. And paradoxically, it is that silent surrender that allows consciousness to bloom even more vibrantly. These small moments of vastness are not isolated blessings. They are seeds planted in the soul. Each moment of presence, each glimpse of infinity, prepares the soil so that life itself may gradually become a continuous expression of awakening. It is a path of no return, a constant reminder that the true home is not found in future achievements, but in the deep intimacy with the now. The awakened observer, living without getting lost in the mind. As consciousness blossoms, something profoundly transformative begins to unfold. You are no longer automatically swept away by the currents of thoughts and emotions that once felt uncontrollable. This does not mean the mind disappears, nor that emotions cease entirely. What changes is your relationship with them. You become the observer, a silent, awakened witness, capable of seeing without being captured, of feeling without being consumed, of thinking without identifying. This new way of being does not come from trying to control the mind through more effort. It arises from the realization that you are not the voice that speaks incessantly inside your head, nor the character that voice is trying to protect or promote. You are the space in which those thoughts arise and fade. You are the consciousness that witnesses, not the content of what is witnessed. This realization radically transforms daily experience. When a challenge arises, the mind may still react, presenting judgments, fears, or quick-fix solutions. But now there is a space between stimulus and response, a conscious gap where you can observe the mind in motion, recognize it for what it is, and choose to respond not from conditioned impulse, but from inner clarity. That space is freedom, and within it lies the true power of presence. To live as an awakened observer is to dwell in that space in all situations. It does not mean becoming cold, indifferent, or apathetic. On the contrary, it means being so present to life that no experience is wasted, no feeling is suppressed, no thought is rejected. Everything is welcomed with acceptance and awareness, but nothing is mistaken for your true identity. This ability to observe without being lost allows a new relationship with suffering. When pain arises, whether physical, emotional, or mental, you feel it fully but without building a story that prolongs it. Suffering stops being a prison and becomes a passing experience, like clouds drifting across the sky. You understand through direct experience that you don't need to resist what is, and that in the deep acceptance of what arises, there is a peace that transcends all circumstances. The mind will continue trying to tell its stories because that is its nature. It will cling to old dramas, seek security in false certainties, project fear into the future, or regret into the past. But the new awakened observer sees these movements as natural waves of an energy that no longer needs to govern your life. The mind loses its throne. It becomes a useful tool, no longer the relentless master. In this state, life becomes simpler, deeper, more authentic. You begin to inhabit each moment with a presence that doesn't require the moment to be different. You begin to hear people beyond their word, to see beyond appearances, to feel beyond masks. Each ordinary moment, a smile, the wind on your skin, the silence of the night, becomes an opportunity to connect with the vastness that pulses silently behind all forms. To live as an awakened observer is to live with silent love. A love that asks for nothing, that depends on no recognition, that is not defined by exchange. It is the love born from the awareness that in essence all things share the same source of being. This is the great gift of awakening, the inner freedom to fully be yourself without being lost in the mind's endless stream. To live anchored in the silence that observes, in the space that allows, in the consciousness that embraces. And so, to walk the world not as someone searching outside themselves, but as someone who recognizes with each step the sacred presence of being. True awakening is not a final destination, nor a distant achievement. It is the beginning of a new way of existing, where every moment is lived with awareness, where each choice flows from a silent center of presence. It is not something to attain and display to the world, but something to live quietly in the intimacy of each breath, each gaze, each simple gesture. Cherish each moment of presence, each small opening to the now, for they are what reveal the vastness of the consciousness within you. Don't seek awakening as if it were something lost outside yourself. Recognize that it has always been silently waiting in the depths of your own being. You don't need to become something more. You only need to remember who you are, beyond stories, beyond fear, beyond masks. Awakening is the home you have always been returning to.